going to talk today about the FAA's proposed regulation for small unmanned aircraft systems, which includes small UAVs or small drones. This came out February 15th. It kind of surprised some people that it came out then, and it's a very unusual document. First of all, the picture here has a little Phantom, DJI Phantom. It's made Chinese-made drone. That one doesn't have propeller guards on it, which is a little unfortunate. But the FAA has been struggling with what to do about these things for a while. February 15th, they released this information. It's you can get the whole download. It's 195 pages. It's very dense. The first 165 pages are the preamble. I've never seen anything like it. And the preamble is very weird. Instead of just releasing this thing and saying, okay, we're asking for comments, in the preamble, in at least 36 places, they invite comments. And in 2 places, in addition to the 36 places, they specifically invite comments. In other words, they're not really sure what they want to do. And it's kind of like, let's just throw it out there and see how the public responds. And there are probably several political reasons for that. But it's very dense. It's a little redundant. It's actually, though, not badly written. It's a lot better written than most FAA things. I don't know how they generated this preamble. It looks like it was written by their in-house attorneys in part, but they may have had outside assistance, because it's generally better than the stuff that they write, even though it is redundant. It's also very political. It's like, don't blame us, blame Congress for the 2012 FAA Reorganization Act, which caused us to do this. And, you know, there are several other places where it's kind of self-serving, which is a little bit unusual for the FAA. So they did an analysis of risk. Currently, there are very few legal commercial operations for any kind of unmanned aircraft system. In order to legally operate an unmanned aircraft system, you have to either be a public entity with a certificate of authorization, and there are maybe a couple hundred of those issued mostly to Border Patrol, places like that, which describe specific operations, or you have to have a special airworthiness certificate in the experimental category. There are only a couple hundred of those. So all the people who are going around making wedding videos and real estate videos for sale and that sort of thing, those are all by and large illegal operations. The FAA has not cracked down on those because they got into trouble when they first started to crack down on them, and they got a very adverse ruling by the administrative law judge, which later, actually in November of last year, got turned around by the NTSB. So they may be back in the business of actually, putting out $10,000 fines for violating some of this stuff. So the document gives its own analysis of why you can't do anything until there's actually a regulation. And so this has all this stuff. If any of you want copies of this presentation, I'll be glad to give them to you. You want to take notes. Model aircraft have been operated for years. For 20 years, there's been Aviation Circular 9157. 91 refers to the operating part of the Federal Aviation Aircraft Regulations that controls it. Number 57 means the 57th in the series. It's about 20 years old, and it gives guidance about model aircraft. They also refer to their associated policy statement, although they don't refer to which one, and there are about 5 of them that may apply in part to model aircraft. The problem is, one of the things that they say in this, which I think will infuriate the model airplane people, is they say, well, you guys have always been illegally operating, but we've used our discretion not to come after you, which most people would say is a very technical legal term for that. That's bullshit. You haven't, this is not an exception. So anyway, this is kind of a summary of where the world is now, waiting for this regulation. In 2012, Congress passed the FAA Modernization Act, and it called on the FAA, or instructed them, to come up with regulations that would allow for the operation of small systems, or actually unmanned systems in the airspace. This is only addressing small UAVs. And small UAVs are, by definition, those that weigh less than 55 pounds. 55 pounds is pretty heavy. And that's a heavy suitcase when you check in an airline. So if you think about a heavy suitcase falling out of the sky from about 500 feet when it's traveling at 100 miles an hour, that's about the kind of impact that you could be looking at from some of these things if they go out of control. So this prospective rule would allow for the operation of small UAVSs, or UASs, unmanned aircraft systems. That's the aircraft, the control station, etc., in the national airspace. And national airspace is a pretty well-defined system of how airspace is divided up. It's not generally well known to people other than pilots and air traffic control personnel as to what the airspace consists of. This proposed rule that they've got out right now just addresses those systems which are less than 55 pounds. There is a type of system which the proposal mentions. It's not part of the proposed rule, but they laid out a potential control regime for micro UAVs. And a micro UAV is defined as being less than about 4 or 5 pounds. And that is not part of the proposed rulemaking, although it's part of the preamble and they want comments on it. So whether that will become part of the final rule or could become part of the final rule, we'll talk about that as we go along. It is very questionable. So, a couple of things that are kind of unique. This would add a new part 107, to the FARs. It would not require any certification of the small UAV. In other words, a small UAV doesn't have to have, meet any kind of certification criteria, but they try and get around that by saying, well, you got to inspect it before each flight. But this is a little surprising to most people. Most people thought that they would come up with some sort of thing that the manufacturer of the UAV would have to go through, and they would have to, meet certain criteria. Not like a manned aircraft, not all the testing for a manned aircraft, but it would be nice to have the manufacturer say, yeah, if the power fails, here's what's going to happen to this thing. It's going to come down. It's not going to, explode. It doesn't contain anything hazardous. There are simple things that they could have required the manufacturer to do. When you look at your laptop, you turn it over, it says it meets FCC certain criteria. Personally, I thought they would, in any kind of regulation like this, they would cause the manufacturer to have to meet a certain set of minimal criteria. But right now, the way it's written, there's no certification criteria at all. Although they are going to talk about registration. Operators are going to have to become licensed. There's a whole section about operator license. We'll talk about that. The little UAVs are going to have to be registered with the FAA. That means a U.S. registration. There are certain criteria about U.S. registration we can talk about. And they're going to have to put registration markings on them, which is kind of interesting. The logic for marking, all aircraft have to be marked, and there are certain criteria about marking. But the reason for marking aircraft is so that, if somebody's doing something illegal and you see them, you can see their, what's called an IN number, their registration number, write that down, call the FAA and say, certain area, I saw this type of airplane with this registration number doing something that I perceived was dangerous, illegal, etc. You're not going to be able to see any kind of registration number on these. If they crash, they can pick it up and like, oh, that's the registration number. But anyway, so there are a number of things, and they've also added some stuff about model airplanes, and they picked up some really, really strange wording that was in the 2012 Act. So comments, you can make comments through these two websites. Comments are due by the 24th of April. So this is, they're pushing this right along, which was a little surprising to folks. A lot of people have said, oh, well, even though they've got this proposed rulemaking thing out, it's going to be years before anything happens. I think right now the FAA is saying, to hell with you all, you've pushed us into doing this, we're going to do it, and if you don't like it, too bad, because we've been told to do it by Congress. Congress screwed it up to start with. Isn't our job to unscramble this? We're going to just do our thing, throw it out there, and you're going to have to live with it. And that's a pretty cynical analysis, but I think might be not too inaccurate. So you can also, it's got all these provisions. You can fax comments, you can do all sorts of things as to comments. And presumably, and I haven't tested this, you can see the comments of others. Anybody here commented on any federal documents before? I stopped doing that after I commented on the biological effects of ionizing radiation report, because this is a report goes in certain periodicity. I was asked to provide comments on it. It's a very thick report. I read it. There were some things in it that were just physically wrong, and I made comments on those and put corrective language. And it turns out what they do is they don't correct a darn thing. They just publish another volume that says, here are the comments we received. And they said, George Moore and somebody else all said this was physically wrong and totally inappropriate, and thank you very much. And after that I said, this is stupid, I'm not commenting on anything, because why would I waste my time commenting on it just to have them write it down. So summary. This allows commercial use. Okay? Commercial use has heretofore been very restricted. This now allows commercial use. They've been working on this for the last 6 years in various forms. But the 2012 thing really kicked in and made them put deadlines on getting things done. It affects small UASs. They had a small UAS rulemaking committee, and the rulemaking committee was pretty extreme. They wanted people to have essentially pilot-like licenses, and if they were operating in certain airspace, they would need to have essentially an instrument for pilots, and it was pretty bizarre. But the 2012 Act, plus their experience already in certification, exemptions, the certificate of authorization, they feel gives them enough background to come forward with these proposals, some of which are against their internal committee work. And they mention this stuff in the preamble. The preamble is actually kind of interesting to read. It's very long and convoluted, but it's pretty read. So here's what's going to happen. This proposed rulemaking includes a new Part 107 of Title 14. That's the Code of Federal Regulations. These are what are referred to as the FARs. Changes to other parts in order to recognize Part 107. In other words, other parts may say, operators need to be certified and for this and that, and this will say, like, operators accept those covered under Part 107. So there are modifications to other FARs and other parts of 14 CFR. There's no certification requirement for the U.S. Again, I find that very surprising. It means basically you can fly any old piece of junk that's weighs less than 55 pounds under this proposed rulemaking. Must weigh less than 55 pounds. No external load or towing. So this eliminates the Google wing project. This eliminates a lot of things. You can bet that there are a lot of people who are going to comment on that. It does not cover anything internationally. This does not allow you to fly anything internationally. This is domestic U.S. only. It's also can cover publicly owned aircraft. You may not realize this, but military aircraft owned by like the state of California or owned by a police agency, those are what are called public aircraft. And public aircraft get a lot of exemptions from not the operating requirements of the air system, but a lot of the maintenance requirements, a lot of the registration requirements, or a lot of things that they're exempt from. So these sorts of things still are going to be in effect. The small UAV can only be operated in visual line of sight. It can be operated through what's called first-person video. That's looking through a camera mounted in the aircraft. But if you do that, you have to have an observer who has visual contact, and the operator has to be positioned so he can stop doing the first-person video and still reacquire visual contact. So why would you want to operate or look through a camera while you're operating? Well, there are several situations, and they describe some of them in the proposed rulemaking preamble. For example, one of the things that's not something I ever really thought much about. Apparently, a lot of people want to use these. A lot of public agencies want to use these things for bridge inspections. You can fly up under a bridge. Well, when you're flying up under a bridge, the operator may want to be looking through the camera mounted on the drone, but somebody else has to have it under visual to see that no helicopter flies by the bridge at the same time. So at all times must remain close enough to the operator for the operator to be capable of seeing the aircraft with vision unaided by any device other than corrective lenses. And they actually have the right definition of what corrective lenses are. What you think they're glasses, contact lenses. Binoculars are not corrective lenses. So it's not that you can be looking with your binoculars and controlling it that way. So this means, basically, we're talking about line of sight within fractions of a mile. Because most of these aircraft, you could not, a small one, a really small one, you can't see the orientation of the thing when it gets more than maybe half a mile away. Plus, there are vertical limits on the operation and airspace limitations. May not operate over any persons not directly involved in the operation. This is pretty bizarre. Most people thought they would have some sort of standoff. When you fly a manned aircraft, even in remote areas, there's like a 500-foot bubble, presumably, around people and buildings and things like that. You have to stay a certain distance away. This says, and nobody really knows what it means, you can't operate over any persons not directly involved in the operation unless they're under something. So one of the helpful things in the preamble says, well, you could go around the neighborhood and ask people to stay indoors. I mean, sure, that's going to work really well. So some of this stuff has not been really well thought out. To operate under this part, you have to be U.S. registered. To be U.S. registered, to have a U.S. registered aircraft, you have to be a U.S. citizen or somebody who has a green card. Foreign people cannot own U.S. registered aircraft. There's an exemption for foreign-owned corporations which do business in the United States. They can register an aircraft, but they have to register, they either have to do it through a subsidiary here or they have to show that they have holdings here. So the registration criteria are just the same as if you're registering a 747 in terms of who can do the registration. Daylight operations only, no flying at night. Now, before this started, we were talking, we'll reference later, to the fact that last couple of nights in Paris, people have been flying drones over Paris, and everybody's all upset. So we wouldn't have to worry about that, right? Because Congress and the FAA have said you can't fly at night. So safe, we would do that because that would be in violation of regulations. I'm being facetious. Official sunrise to official sunset. There's a lot of good reasons to want to fly at night. And flying at night, there's no real safety. It's actually easier for these small drones to see them at night than it is to see them in the daytime for a lot of operations. Must yield right away to other aircraft, manned or unmanned, balloons, etc. In other words, the operator's burden to stay out of the way of other folks. And that's really not that much of a problem visually. May use a visual observer, but that's not required. It's only required if you're going to fly through the camera. You can't daisy chain the visual observers. In other words, you can't say, okay, Ferenc, you go a mile this way and somebody else go another mile, and we'll just, keep in visual contact with the thing. Can't do that. Operator always has to be involved. You can have more than one observer. First-person camera cannot satisfy the scene avoider requirement. Maximum speed of 100 miles per hour. I don't think that's a real problem. Maximum altitude of 500 feet above ground level. Minimum weather visibility of 3 miles from the control station. Now, that's a bit bizarre because most of this is going to be done in Class G airspace. And in Class G airspace for a manned aircraft, I'll explain what Class G airspace is in a minute. For manned aircraft in Class G airspace, they have to have 1 mile of visibility and operate clear of clouds. So these things are going to have more visibility requirement, clear of clouds. Whenever you see the flashing, what's called the running rabbit at the Monterey airport, if you're up high, you look down, you can see these flashing lights, or you can see the rotating beacon running during the day. That means that there are instrument flight conditions prevalent, and that means that there's less than 3 miles visibility generally, or the ceiling's too low. And it's really kind of funny because they didn't have any ceiling requirements in this. So, other things. No operations are allowed in Class A airspace. We'll explain the airspace in just a minute. Operations in Class B, C, D, and E airspace are allowed with ATC permission. This is air traffic control. It doesn't say exactly how you're going to get a hold of air traffic control, and it doesn't exactly say what air traffic control's response is going to do. In the drones class that we taught here and in the fall, we did a little experiment and we called the local ATC facility to ask about, we want to fly a drone someplace and see what their response was. And their response was, "Who the hell are you? Why are you calling us?" I decided to repeat that when I taught J-term at Middlebury, and we called Burlington Airport. And the operator at Burlington Airport was like, "Okay, where are you? What do you want to do? What time do you want to do it?" I mean, he had the whole spiel down. I don't know. This is not something that they're used to. Now, operations in Class G airspace are allowed without ATC permission. And Class G airspace underlies a lot of airspace in the country. It either has it runs from the surface to 700 feet or to 1,200 feet. So a lot of portions of the country, it can also run up to 14,000 feet. But since you can only operate below 500 feet, you're going to be in Class G airspace a lot of the time. This is the airspace classification system that we use in the United States. So this is strange. I don't expect you to follow it all, but Class B airspace, these are the terminal control areas like for big airports. SFO, San Jose. They call this an inverted wedding cake. It's Class B airspace. Class C airspace is controlled airspace. It's like a mini Class B airspace. Monterey has Class C airspace. Class D airspace is where you have an airport with an operating control tower. So, there are various examples of Class D airspace. Then Class E airspace is kind of all the rest, with the exception of Class G, which underlies things. It's very difficult to find Class G airspace, even if you're a pilot looking on a chart. And see an example here in the chart. But all of these have different criteria for visibility, who you have to talk to, etc. Class G airspace is often referred to as uncontrolled airspace. And this caused some difficulties when the FAA first started looking at drones, because even though it's uncontrolled, it doesn't mean that the FAA doesn't have authority there. And there were a lot of people running around saying, well, the FAA has no authority there because it's uncontrolled. That was a totally bogus argument. And when you have a control tower operating temporarily in Class G airspace, then you have some control airspace. But notice that, here in Class G airspace, manned aircraft only have to have a statute mile of visibility, not the 3 miles that they're now going to be requiring of these small UAVs. That's a little, there's not sure that they've worked all this sort of stuff out. And, if you have the time, effort, and desire, or you're a pilot, you can go through all these things and figure out how it all works together. And it actually does. This is a diagram. This is actually, I think, up at Windsor Locks, showing what one of these charts, these are the kind of charts you use when you're flying visual flight rules and you try and spread these out on your lap and figure out what's there. This is that's a terminal control area. This is a San Francisco sectional, which is larger scale, and you can see Monterey on here. But this is the kind of thing which people are going to have to start dealing with to figure out where these airspace situations exist. So, for instance, you can pour over that for days.
Yeah, I find it.
They're kind of fun. This is SFO actually. Showing some of the stuff. You see the Oakland Airport upper right-hand side, and SFO with its runways, etc. So you can't. The operator actually is going to have to take tests. Going to have to get a license. No operations from a moving vehicle other than from a waterborne craft. So you can go whale watching with one of these and operate it from whale. It doesn't say anything about not overflying whales, but if there's a person riding on the back of the whale, you're not supposed to fly over the top of it. No careless or reckless operation. Requires a pre-flight inspection by the operator, which is like, it works. So not much there. Person may not operate. You don't have to get a medical license, but you have to ensure that you don't have anything that prohibits you from operating. Then they talk about this micro UAS category, which they don't ever really say. They could have just made this part of the proposal, but they talk about it, although it's not part of the proposal, and they specifically invite comments about whether it should be part of the proposal, which is really not the way you expect government to act. So here's actually a breakdown, which I find very interesting. On the left hand is what Canada does with small, what's a micro, up to 2 kilograms. The right-hand column is what the U.S. could do with the same proposal, what they're thinking about doing. And the middle column is what's in this proposal for small, less than 55 kilograms. Remember, the current proposal does not have the micro UAS subcategory. This is what the subcategory would look like, according to the FAA. I don't see why they would make a difference in the altitude, and why if it's 100 feet between friends. The micro UAS could only operate in Class G airspace. Very similar to some of the Canadians, but look at what the Canadians do for distance from people, etc. They've got like 100-foot lateral separation and some things that really make a lot of sense. The U.S. would say you can fly over anybody. That's probably more realistic, in terms of how people are really going to operate these things than any other stuff. The Monterey Peninsula Herald wants to take a little micro UAV and fly over, the Fisherman's Wharf Pier or over a beach or something like that, take some video. What are they going to do? If it's under this proposed thing, they couldn't fly over the people unless they're part of the operation. Well, maybe you could go out to each and every one of them and say, do you want to be part of this operation so we can fly over you? And you're going to get probably, some people are going to say, hell no, or, more graphically say no. And what does it mean to be part of the operation? Nobody actually knows. I mean, can you get around that by getting people to sign waivers? One other thing, and this is kind of a caveat, none of this has any bearing on the legal system in terms of liability. You fly one of these, you conform to, let's say the proposed rule goes into effect, you jump through all the hoops, you fly your little UAV and it falls on Ferentz's head. And Ferentz can sue you even though you've done everything appropriate, and conforming to government regulations never protects you against lawsuit. So it's interesting because later you'll see down here, well, that's on the next slide, what aeronautical knowledge is required. Under the proposed rule, in the middle column, the applicant has to pass a knowledge test, and they have to pass another test every 2 years. These have to be done at a testing center, the same testing center used for pilots. So that means you have to travel to the testing center, you have to do all this. There's a whole bunch of stuff about who can accept your application for an operator's license. It's a whole bag of worms. But none of the stuff, notice operator training required. The Canadians require you to demonstrate some competence to operate the thing. None of the proposed stuff for the US requires any showing of competence. They want you to take an exam that shows that you know about what class G airspace is, and these typical exam questions are like, how long is your license valid for? Okay, well that doesn't help you in terms of flying the thing. There's no requirement to do any flying, etc. Operator certificate required. The Canadians don't require an operator certificate. In other words, they're not adding a new pilot's license. We're going to add a new pilot's license. I'm going to get a new endorsement on my pilot license that says, I'm a certified small UAS operator. If I want to jump through all the hoops. Pre-flight safety check, everybody says, yes, that's a good idea. Notice liability insurance. The Canadians require 100,000 Canadian dollar liability insurance. No requirement for liability insurance whatsoever in the U.S. proposal, which is not inconsistent with manned aircraft. Although people think there is no requirement in manned aircraft to have liability insurance. That's true for a lot of things. Used to be true of cars, no longer true of cars in California at least. But that's a state-by-state requirement. I can't think of a state right now that doesn't require liability insurance, but there used to be states that did not require liability insurance. So, and the last one, aircraft must be made of frangible material. In other words, stuff that comes apart when it hits something. Depends on how hard you hit things. I hit a tree with a little drone I had, broke some parts of it a couple of weeks ago. No major damage. But there's also a requirement to report any accidents, damage to property. Well, what does that mean? And these are serious questions because there's a similar requirement for aircraft, and you would be amazed at how many hoops an aircraft owner will go through not to have to report damage to the NTSB and the FAA. And there are certain things which you don't have to report. Damage to the landing gear, taxi off the runway, damage to the landing gear. You don't have to do that. Prop strike you might have to, but the reason people don't want to report it is because once you report it, it goes on your insurance record. Once it's on your insurance record, your rates go up. People don't want that. But there would be a requirement here to report it. So the pilots are operators. Operators must obtain a certificate or license and are required to pass an initial exam, and there's like 10 different categories that they list of things that are going to be on the exam. Be vetted by the TSA. In other words, we aren't just going to let any old person do this. They've got to pass TSA screening. So if you've ever done anything bad in your life, you're at the top. Obtain an unmanned aircraft operator certificate with a small UAS rating, which never expires. Pilot's licenses never expire. Most people don't understand that. But in order to fly an airplane, you have to have a pilot's license, plus you have to have a current medical certificate, plus you have to have a currency certification. So even though your license never expires, I drag out my license and show it to you. The medical and the other things have to be in accordance to do that. So this, once you do this initially, you don't have to do it again, but you have to do the every 2-year certification. And if you don't do the certification, you're going to be out. No, I don't know that the proposed rule, I don't remember what it says about once you've skipped a cycle, what you have to do, but presumably you have to get back in the cycle by taking the test again. Recurrency every 24 months, be at least 17 years old. Make available to the FAA upon request your little drone so that they can pick at it and assure themselves that it's safe. Report an accident, injury or property damage. No indication of how much property damage. If you crash, it's always going to be some property damage. We're talking about a blade of grass here. Somebody will comment on this. They ought to put some reasonable limit, $100, $500, whatever it is, property damage. When you fly it into somebody's car window, you're flying into a car and you scratch the car, that's, $1,000, $500, or it's my car, less than that. Conduct a pre-flight inspection, blah, blah, blah. The visual observer, not required to be certified. alive, not blind. I mean, that's a bad thing about blind people, but you know, since it's visual line of sight, you have to have some vision. Can communicate by radio with the operator or other means, cell phone, whatever it is. All visual observers must be able to observe the UAV, and you can't do this daisy chain. You can't put people in various locations. Registration and marking. Registration is going to be required. Markings are going to be required. They're a little diverse about what their markings. They're supposed to be suitably sized. So if your UAV is this big, you know, suitably sized might be size 12 type. Costs and benefits. There's a whole cost and benefit analysis. The FAA says that since it's less than $100 million in their costs, under their assumptions to run this program, they don't have. There's a whole that $100 million limit triggers a whole bunch of things that an agency has to do and comply with. They don't have to do that, but they've costed out these various things. And they contest, in several places they say, well, if we save just one life by this regulation, it will be worth it. I'm not sure that the regulation is ever going to save any lives. Who knows? So this is the cost analysis that they did of what it's going to cost an applicant. You know, they say it's going to cost you $9 in travel expenses to get to one of these training centers. That's a little optimistic. The test fees, that's $150 a shot. These knowledge training centers make their money by, you know, they're the only game in town. But, you know, if you want to make it, if you want to set up the Monterey Knowledge Training Center, I guess you can go through whatever it is. And, yeah, you have to do a certain amount of things to do that. You know, you have to do, probably have to pay somebody. Certified flight instructors are going to be able to sign off people on the applicant list, application paperwork. Somebody's got to take your application paperwork and look at a passport or one of the other identifiable means to say you are who you are and that it's your application. So there's a step there for that. The owner, that's the person who owns, not operates. Owner and operator can be two separate people who do the same. They say that's only going to be a $5 fee. So for the first shot, they say it's going to be like $215, and every 2 years it's going to be another $160, $170. Probably doubling that. You're somewhere between that and what double that is, because it depends on how close you are to a knowledge testing center. You know, and if you start thinking of other realistic things, oh, I've got to go to the knowledge testing center, and that's going to take all Monday. You know, you lose a day of work. That's another additional cost. They don't care too much about it. Here's what they say. They say, look, you know, these things are smaller and lighter than manned aircraft, so we've just decided that we don't have to pay that much attention to them, and you know, they propose significantly less risk. And I think that's true. I mean, I don't disagree with that. They are less risky than, you know, the 747 flying into your house. You know, if one of these crashes on your roof, you know, may do some property damage, but not. You know. But what they're really not saying or really not discussing is people are doing this, and people are going to do this, and we need to have some way of having some level of control, but not draconian government control. There's a certain element in this proposal which is kind of government intrusive into things that heretofore there haven't been. For example, it says, we'll get to this later, you know, for a model airplane, you have to operate it in conjunction with some national community-based program. What does that mean? Nobody's ever heard of that. I think it's the Model Aircraft Association lobbied Congress when they were doing this 2012 FAA certification to not have it have anything to do with model aircraft. The only difference between a model aircraft, which is now defined as up to 55 pounds, and a small UAV is the purpose for which it's used. If you use it only for recreational purposes, it's a model aircraft. if you use it for commercial purposes, and commercial purposes can have a very broad meaning. Could include, students, could include a university using it, etc. That's still covered under this. So, the FAA says they have basically two concerns about unmanned aircraft. The first is, how do they exercise see and avoid? How do they work with the classic thing that we've always done with aircraft, which is the pilot's responsible to see and avoid other aircraft, because unmanned aircraft can't see and avoid. So their solution to this is, it's never out of the pilot's or the operator's sight. They can see and avoid by seeing the other aircraft and just bringing their drone down. Plus, they're not going to be very high. Most manned aircraft operations are well above the 500 foot above ground level that these things are going to be allowed to operate at. So maybe it's not so much of a problem, but certainly, by keeping it within visual sight range, it's not going to be that much of a problem. So, they did not, Google and Amazon, who were interested in delivering things by drones anymore for the publicity value than the real value. There's not the current, last issue, not the current issue that's on newsstands right now. The issue before this of Wired magazine had a very nice little 2-page article which showed the real world drone operations. There's one pizza delivery operation in the Russian Federation near where they had the Winter Olympics. The only one that really has much of a real value is up in the North Sea. There's a island that's about 12 miles offshore, and they've been replacing the air delivery of some medicines to one of the occupants by delivering it by drone, which makes sense. I mean, they can operate it, they can get it over there. If it falls in the water, so what? And it's costly efficient. But the point is, they had the article actually has the drone type and what its lift capability is. And the maximum lift capability in these is about 6 pounds. So we're not talking about things that carry really heavy stuff, at least so far. The second safety concern is what happens if it falls out of the air. If the operator loses control, there's a couple ways this could happen. One is your little drone, which presumably is electrically operated, or even it's gas engines or whatever, it loses power and it comes down, falls out of the sky. The other is, let's say your control station shuts down. You're flying with your little control station, and, oh, the battery's died. What happens to the drone? Now, a lot of this doesn't, flying over the top of people may not be the issue, because if it's flying over your head when this bad stuff happens, it's probably going to keep flying in some direction, not fall on you. But that's this is called loss of positive control. So there's an interesting video here I wanted to show, a little portion of the startup. We'll only watch a few minutes of this.
Drones. They're the third most annoying thing in the sky after mosquitoes and plastic bags caught in the breeze. They are not gorgeous, weird kid from American Beauty. They're trash and they kill sea turtles. You've got turtle blood on your hands. But all of a sudden, drones are everywhere. We even use them to shoot romantic wedding videos. And what could possibly go wrong with that?
Let's just watch this for a minute, because this is actually pretty good.
Deadly drone strikes in both Waziristan and Yemen. You probably didn't hear about them on the news unless you were watching this.
The U.S. has carried out another drone attack in Pakistan's rested tribal areas, killing at least 8 people.
That's the only footage reporting either strike that we could find, and it's from the Iranian government's English language TV station. That channel is buried deep in your cable package. I think it's actually somewhere between C-SPAN Junior and CAN, the Kirstie Alley network. But there is something strange about the fact that we launched deadly drone strikes in 2 sovereign nations that are...
Actually, if you want this is if you haven't seen it, it's a very funny, but also carrying some very important issues. Oliver Altman, as most of you know, addresses some really significant issues, although he says he's not doing a news show. And there's some really interesting stuff in here in this video, if you want to watch it, about particularly our drones overseas strike program. Okay, so this is what the FAA says. At this point in time, we've determined that technology has not matured to the extent that would allow small UASs to be used safely in lieu of visual line of sight without creating a hazard to other users of the national airspace system or the public, or posing a threat to national security. Yeah, okay. Probably true. As of August 2014, they'd set up these test sites, which they were prompted to do under the 2012 order. In addition, they're going to select a center of excellence. Everybody has a center of excellence. Nobody has any excellence, but everybody has a center for it. So just don't hold your breath waiting for the center of excellence to come about. Okay, so we're pretty much through what I wanted to discuss, and let's talk about the problem areas. This thing about not flying over people kind of flies in the face of what you want to do with most of these systems. You know, people want to take video. People like the Monterey Peninsula Herald. You know, when you have the state fair, not state fair. What's the Monterey County Fair? The one that's out here at the fairgrounds. They'll probably want to fly a little drone and take some high-angle video of people. If you can't fly over people, then what does that mean? I mean, that's kind of dumb. I mean, you could run around and say, okay, let's everybody sign a release, you're all part of this operation, so then we can do it. Or you could say, everybody stand under a tent, but then you say, wait a minute, then we can't see the people. So that's not really that great. The requirement for 3 miles visibility seems a little extreme. Class G airspace is where? I should put a question mark after that, because you gotta figure that out for each time you want to fly the thing. Now, if you're flying in the same area, if you know where Class G airspace is around Monterey, that's fine. A lot of this stuff, people are probably just going to call the FAA and say, air traffic, I'm going to be using my little drone at no more than 500 feet above MIS, and I want to take some video of the people marching to graduation. Maybe, but it's going to be a burden on the FAA to do that. Why no standoff like the Canadians have? Are the Canadians' rigs for micro UAVs a lot better? I mean, I don't know why the hell they would put them in the preamble, other than the fact that they're probably the only thing they could find, but they're actually better. Insurance, that's an issue. 55 pounds is not small. That's like a suitcase flying 100 miles an hour falling on you from a tall building. But are we just going nuts about this stuff? Are we making more restrictions about this stuff than's really warranted? I mean, we don't have any restrictions about helicopters flying over your head because maybe the helicopter will fall on you. We don't say you can't fly a 747 over San Francisco because maybe it'll fall in the city. I mean, we're going a little bit nuts about this idea about drones. And they're really not focusing on loss of control. That you could put a requirement on small drone manufacturers that, if the battery runs down to a certain level, or, you have some sort of battery level sensor, and if the battery is below a certain amount, the thing slowly settles, or something like that. I mean, they could come up with some creative restrictions or controls or regulations in that area. And this model aircraft thing, they took the language out of the 2012 FAA Modernization Act, which includes within the program of a nationwide community-based organization. I defy anybody to tell me what a nationwide community-based organization is. I don't think anybody knows what it is. But it's going to be in the proposed rule. Privacy, which is the main concern that most people have about drones. The FAA punts on that. They said, privacy is ain't my job to do privacy. Their only concern about privacy is the privacy of information provided for in the registration process or when you apply for an operator license. They're like the road striping people. They just run over the, I think that's in Arizona, I think it's an armadillo. So, some unfortunate animal. So, there's a bunch of stuff in the stuff about military operators, police, etc. Not about anything about the kind of most things people worry about, but just like for military operators, they say, well, if you have, it's like military pilots. Military pilots do not have aircraft operating licenses issued by the FAA. They have their own military operations. When they operate in the airspace, they operate pursuant to the operating instructions by the FAA. But in order, when they get out of the military or stop flying from the military, or want to go out on the weekend and rent an airplane and fly, they've got to have an FAA license. They get an FAA license by going to the FAA and say, here's my military license. And the FAA says, okay, here's your FAA license. But they have to have the FAA license. And there's similar provisions in this for military UAS or UAV operators to walk in, get a license, and then be in the cycle and have to do the semi-annual, biannual review cycle. Certificate of authorizations will still exist. They're an alternative to working under this, but they're trying to push everybody to go under this new Part 107. They're not encouraging people to do stuff. Are we panicking about drones? I mean, is this too extreme? I mean, why don't we just say, look, as long as you don't fly above 500 feet, and as long as if you're within 5 miles of an airport, you call the airport people and tell them you're going to do it, have at it. Do whatever you want. Let the marketplace take control. Are we just going nuts about this? Because in some of these aspects, we're being more restrictive about these operations than operating manned aircraft, which are arguably more dangerous in some of the operations. This is a reference to what's just gone on with the drones over Paris.
Have been spotted overnight, 1 a.m. time in Paris, and then 6 a.m. They were seen in various sites, including some say the Louvre, Place de la Concorde, which is very close, the US Embassy is just saying, as well as a couple of restaurants in Paris. This is a concern for authorities because clearly Paris is still on a high-level alert following those attacks at Charlie Hebdo 7 weeks ago and at the kosher store. What police are saying is they went to these locations, but by the time they got there, the people in charge of these drones had already left. They say it's too much of a coincidence that these these 5 drones were seen at the same day, at the same night across the Parisian skies. So what they've done, Carol, is they've set up a team of 10 police officers that are just focused entirely on this aspect of the investigation. Now, what we are hearing is these were small to medium-sized drones. They were not military, but of course, police are taking this highly seriously because, if you remember last month, there were more drones were seen flying over palace, and now we've seen more than 15 cases of drones flying around some of France's main sites, including EDF, which is a leading French nuclear plant. And so they said they are concerned about this. It's not the first time. They're taking it very, very seriously. But interestingly, there is no way of knowing, and it's so easy to buy these drones nowadays. You know that, our viewers know that. They can range between $300 to $500, some of the cheapest ones. And so we do not know at this stage if they are malicious or simply drone enthusiasts, Carol.
Yeah, there are a lot of new criteria, like don't drink and drone, that sort of thing. But, so she mentioned the flyovers of the French nuclear plants. There was an article the other day by Greenpeace relating that to, well, somebody can create a Fukushima-like accident by skillfully piloting the drone to knock off the off-site power and then flying other drones to take down the emergency diesels. It's a little too dramatic. There are a lot of things about these small unmanned aircraft that people don't, they're true statements that can be totally exaggerated. Okay, that's pretty much it. So, question?